I sat perfectly still in my armchair, hands folded in my lap, as my three grown children discussed my financial future as if I were invisible. The spring sunlight filtered through the tall windows of my Upper West Side apartment, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. Outside Central Park was bursting with new life. Inside, it seemed, my life was being neatly filed away. Mom doesn't understand the value of money anymore, Dominic said with that artificially patient tone he had perfected over the last few years. At 48, my eldest son had grown to resemble his father in appearance, but not in temperament. Where Harold had been gentle and thoughtful, Dominic was decisive and controlling. At her age, she needs our help managing her finances. My middle child. Rebecca nodded in agreement, her sleek bob swinging with the motion. The apartment alone is just draining your savings, Mom. There are several assisted living facilities in New Jersey that would be much more cost-effective. Thomas. My youngest said nothing substantive as usual, merely nodding along with his siblings. At 42, he still deferred to them in family matters, despite being a successful pediatrician who made life-altering decisions for his patients daily. I watched as Dominic's manicured fingers tapped on his laptop, creating a spreadsheet of my expenses. These art supplies and museum memberships are unnecessary expenses, and these trips to Italy, Mom, be reasonable, your pension only stretches so far. My gaze drifted to the small painting hanging on the wall opposite me. A delicate still life by a prominent 20th century Italian artist, one that Harold had purchased 40 years ago for what seemed an extravagant sum at the time. The children never looked at it. Not really. They saw it as merely decorative, an old woman's sentimental attachment. They had no idea what it was actually worth. I am Victoria Blackwell, widow of Harold Blackwell, and at 72 I found myself being treated like a child by the very children I had raised. My late husband and I had both been professors at Columbia University, he in art history, specializing in Renaissance masters, and I in Italian Renaissance art, with a focus on female artists of the period. We had built our life around art, literature, and education. Our modest academic salaries had been supplemented by Harold's family money and his exceptional eye for emerging artists. Over decades, we had carefully curated a small but significant collection of art that had been both our passion and, unbeknownst to our children, our retirement plan. The apartment they were so eager to sell had been purchased in 1975 for what seemed an impossible sum then, $85,000. Mortgaging our future on the belief that the neglected brownstone with its high ceilings and original moldings was worth the sacrifice. Now it was worth well over $3 million, though I doubted any of my children had actually researched current real estate values. When Harold died 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack, something shifted in my relationship with our children. Without their father's authoritative presence, they began to view me differently, not as the respected professor and expert in my field, but as an aging widow who needed guidance. The dreamy art professor who didn't understand practical matters like money. It was true that Harold had handled our investments, but not because I was incapable. We had simply divided responsibilities in our marriage, and financial management had been his domain, while I had managed our social connections, academic network, and the household. But my children saw only what they expected to see. I think we should set up automatic bill payments from Mom's account. Rebecca suggested, her legal mind always looking for efficient systems, and perhaps give her a monthly allowance for discretionary spending. That's a good idea. Dominic agreed already, typing. We'll need to inventory everything of value too, for estate planning purposes. He didn't look up as he added, those paintings might fetch something at auction, though I doubt they're worth much these days. I nearly laughed out loud at that, but kept my expression neutral. Let them believe what they wanted. For now. Mom, are you listening? Rebecca's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. This is important. We're trying to help you. I'm listening, dear. I replied, my voice calm. It's just a lot to take in. We know it's hard to acknowledge you need help, Dominic said, his tone softening with practiced compassion. But that's what we're here for. I nodded, appearing appropriately grateful for their concern. After they left, I walked slowly around my apartment, touching each artwork, each sculpture, each precious book. The apartment told the story of our lives, Harold's and mine, through objects collected over nearly 50 years of marriage. Each piece had a memory attached, but also a value that my children had no concept of. The family meetings about my finances became a monthly occurrence. Each time I would sit quietly while they reviewed my expenses with increasing scrutiny. Mom, you spent $200 on framing last month. Dominic questioned, peering at my bank statement as if examining evidence of criminal activity. That's extravagant. It was for a print I've had for years. Dear, the old frame was damaged. But $200. You could have gone to a discount framer or just put it away. You have enough art on your walls already. Rebecca often suggested more direct control. Mom, I think it would be easier if I just had access to your accounts to protect you from making impulsive decisions. Thomas, during one of these sessions, walked around the apartment with a thoughtful expression. Mom, have you considered selling some of these decorative items? You don't need so many things at this stage of life. They formed what they jokingly called a committee to approve any major expenditure I might want to make. I needed their permission to travel to purchase anything over $500 or to donate to the charities and arts organizations I had supported for decades. The irony wasn't lost on me. These were the same children whom Harold and I had raised to be independent thinkers. We had encouraged their education, funded their graduate studies, helped with down payments on their first homes. Dominic's MBA from Wharton, Rebecca's law degree from Yale, Thomas's medical school expenses, all paid in full without loans. We had wanted them unburdened by debt as they began their adult lives. Now they treated me as if I had never made a sound financial decision, as if the wealth they had benefited from had materialized despite my involvement rather than because of it. I remembered the day Harold and I had purchased the small Modigliani drawing, how we had agonized over the expense ultimately, deciding that beauty and artistic significance would always retain value. We had been right. That small investment had multiplied many times over, as had most of our careful purchases. But I kept these thoughts to myself, allowing my children to believe I was acquiescing to their superior wisdom. In truth, I was watching, waiting, and planning. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday evening in November. I was watching an episode of Antiques Roadshow more for comfort than entertainment when a painting similar to one in my collection was appraised for an astonishing sum. I sat up straighter, my heart beating faster, as I realized that if that piece was worth so much, then perhaps our collection's value had appreciated even more dramatically than I had assumed. 2 days later, fate intervened in the form of an alumni event at Columbia. I attended out of habit and loyalty, expecting nothing more than mediocre wine and conversations about the university's changing campus. Instead, I encountered Isabel Chen, one of my most brilliant former students, now a prominent art appraiser with Sotheby's Professor Blackwell. She exclaimed, genuine pleasure lighting her features. I've thought of you often. Your lectures on Artemisia Gentileschi changed the course of my life. We chatted amicably about her career and mutual acquaintances until the conversation naturally turned to art collections and the current market. Would you consider visiting my apartment sometime? I asked casually. I'd love your professional opinion on a few pieces Harold and I collected over the years. And Isabel arrived the following week, her professional demeanor giving way to increasing excitement as she moved through my apartment. Professor, this Modigliani and this small Picasso sketch. Do you have provenance documentation for these? I led her to Harold's meticulously organized filing cabinet, where every purchase was documented, every provenance recorded, every insurance assessment filed. As Isabel reviewed the papers, her eyes widened. Professor Blackwell, I don't think you realize the value of what you have here. The market for these artists has exploded in the last decade. This collection could be worth. She named a figure that made me sit down abruptly. Are you certain? I would need to do formal appraisals, but yes, I'm reasonably certain, especially given the impeccable provenance and condition. She hesitated before adding, "If you ever consider selling any pieces, please call me first. I have clients who would be very interested." After she left, I made another call. To Julian Reed, an old friend who owned a prestigious gallery in Chelsea. "Julian, do you still have dinner with Marcus Donovan?" "Occasionally." The attorney. "Yes, about once a month. Why do you ask?" "I need his services, and I'd prefer my children not know about it. Could you arrange a discreet meeting?" 3 days later, I sat in Marcus Donovan's wood-paneled office, laying out my situation and my plan. Harold had trusted Marcus with all our legal matters for 30 years, and I knew he would understand. "So let me get this straight, Victoria," he said, leaning back in his chair after I finished explaining. "Your children think you're financially naive and are attempting to control your assets for your own good, but they have no idea about the actual value of your art collection." "Precisely. And instead of confronting them, you want to secretly sell the artwork, establish new accounts they can't access, and essentially secure your financial independence without their knowledge." "Yes. They've made it abundantly clear that they don't trust my judgment. I see no reason to include them in decisions they've demonstrated. They don't respect my ability to make." Marcus's smile was slow and appreciative. "Harold always said you were the strategic one in the relationship." I see he wasn't exaggerating. He leaned forward. "Here's what we'll do. Over the next 5 months, I executed my plan with meticulous care. Marcus established a new trust in my name, with accounts at a bank different from the one my children monitored. Julian Reed facilitated private sales of selected artworks to discerning collectors, while Isabel provided professional appraisals and authentication. The Modigliani drawing sold for $2 million to a Swiss collector who had coveted the artist's work for decades. The small Picasso sketch, a preliminary study for a famous painting, brought $8 million from a Japanese technology entrepreneur. The 17th century Italian. Still life by a female artist whose work had recently been rediscovered by feminist art historians, fetched $5 million from a newly established museum seeking to correct historical imbalances in their collection. Several other smaller pieces collectively added another $4 million to my secret fund Isabel arranged for museum-quality reproductions to replace the sold artworks. The reproductions were so skillfully done that even an educated eye would need close inspection to identify them as copies. My children, who had never truly looked at the art that surrounded them, noticed nothing. With Marcus's guidance, I purchased a small villa in Tuscany through a holding company, a property with a garden overlooking rolling hills, planted with olive trees and grapes. I established an anonymous scholarship for art history students, specializing in overlooked female artists, and I invested the remaining funds with a financial advisor who had come highly recommended by Julian, not in risky ventures, but in stable income-generating investments that would supplement my pension handsomely. All the while I continued to live frugally, according to my children's budget. I clipped coupons for groceries. I complained mildly about the restrictions, but accepted them with seeming resignation. I sold a few inexpensive decorative items to appease Thomas's suggestion about downsizing. I allowed Dominic to believe he was protecting me from financial ruin. 6 months after my meeting with Marcus, I received an email from Rebecca. "Family meeting this Sunday at 2. Important matters to discuss. Please don't make other plans." I prepared carefully for this meeting, selecting a modest outfit that would reinforce their perception of me as their unworldly mother. I baked the cookies they had loved as children. I arranged fresh flowers in the vase that had been a wedding gift to Harold and me. They arrived together, a united front. Dominic carried a folder thick with documents. Rebecca had her professional demeanor firmly in place. Thomas looked uncomfortable carrying glossy brochures. "Mom," Dominic began after perfunctory greetings, "we've been researching retirement communities, and we've found the perfect place for you." "It's in New Jersey," Rebecca added. "Very safe with a good ratio of staff to residents. They have activities outings and an on-site medical facility. The apartments are small but adequate." Dominic continued. And most importantly, it's within your budget. If we sell this apartment, the proceeds will keep you comfortable there for the rest of your life. Thomas silently passed me the brochures, not meeting my eyes. I took them, flipping through images of beige corridors and communal dining rooms. I see, I said quietly. And when would you propose I make this move? We've actually put down a refundable deposit to hold a unit. Rebecca said, her tone suggesting I should be grateful for this initiative. There's availability beginning next month. We can handle everything, Dominic assured me. The sale of the apartment, the downsizing, the move. You won't have to worry about a thing. I set the brochures down carefully on the coffee table between us. That's very thorough of you. Before I consider this option, though, there are some changes in my financial situation that you should be aware of. Their expression shifted subtly. Concern, perhaps a touch of alarm. What changes? Mom, Rebecca asked cautiously. Have you been spending outside the budget we created? Not exactly, I replied. I've been making some investment decisions. Dominic's brow furrowed. What kind of investments? Mom, you should have consulted us first. Should I? I kept my voice mild. The way you consulted me about planning my future in a retirement home. The atmosphere in the room tensed. I could see Dominic preparing to lecture me, so I continued before he could speak. Over the past 6 months, I have sold several pieces from my art collection. The total from these sales amounts to just over $11 million. Silence. Complete stunned silence. That's not possible. Dominic finally sputtered. Those decorative paintings couldn't possibly be worth that much. The decorative painting over the fireplace was a Modigliani Dominic. The sketch in the hallway was by Picasso. The still life in the dining room was by Artemisia, Gentileschi's most talented student. What you see on my walls now are museum-quality reproductions. Rebecca found her voice first. You sold valuable artwork without telling us, without consulting financial advisors or art experts. I consulted both, actually. Just not the ones you know about. But where's the money? Thomas asked, speaking up for the first time. Is it in your regular accounts? No. It's in a trust that I established with the help of Father's attorney, Marcus Donovan. The funds are being professionally managed and are generating income that will supplement my pension quite nicely. I allowed myself a small smile as I continued. I've also purchased a villa in Tuscany where I plan to spend 6 months of each year. The climate is better for my arthritis, and I have many colleagues in Florence with whom I can continue my research on Renaissance women artists. The expressions on my children's faces cycled through disbelief, shock, anger, and confusion. Dominic looked as if I had personally betrayed him by making financial decisions without his approval. Why would you do this behind our backs? He demanded, his voice rising. After everything we've done to help you manage your money. The same reason you planned my future without meaningful input from me, I replied calmly. You assumed I was incapable of making sound decisions. You treated me as though my age had rendered me incompetent, despite my decades of experience and education. We were trying to protect you, Rebecca insisted. Were you? Or were you protecting yourselves from the inconvenience of a mother who might need actual support rather than just financial management? Was it easier to tuck me away in a facility than to ask what I might want for my remaining years? Thomas had gone pale. Mom, we didn't mean to. I've also revised my will, I interrupted gently. The majority of my estate will go to fund scholarships for art history students and to support small museums focusing on overlooked artists. Each of you will receive a modest inheritance, enough to remember me by, but not enough to make you resent the choices I've made with what is after all my money. Dominic stood abruptly. How could you do this, after all we've done for you? I looked at my eldest son with genuine curiosity. What exactly have you done for me? Dominic restricted my spending, questioned my every purchase, planned to sell my home out from under me, made me feel incompetent and burdensome. We were trying to be responsible, he shouted. No, I corrected him, keeping my voice even. You were being controlling under the guise of responsibility. There's a significant difference. Rebecca Ever the pragmatist was already calculating. If what you're saying about the art is true, then you've significantly undervalued your assets for years. The estate taxes alone have been accounted for in the trust structure Marcus created. I assured her he is, after all, one of the top estate attorneys in New York. The meeting deteriorated after that. Dominic stormed out, declaring that I had lost my mind. Rebecca stayed attempting to convince me to at least let her review the legal documents. Thomas sat in stunned silence, occasionally looking at me, as if seeing me for the first time. After they left, I poured myself a glass of the good Barolo I'd been saving for a special occasion. Standing by the window overlooking the park, I felt lighter than I had in years, not triumphant exactly, but vindicated. Liberated. The next month, I flew to Italy to spend spring and summer in my new home. The villa was smaller than the apartment, but perfect for my needs. A studio space flooded with northern light, a garden where I could sit and read, a spare bedroom for visitors I actually wanted to host. Evelyn Carter, my neighbor and closest friend in New York, came to visit in June. We sat in the garden drinking local wine and watching the sunset over the Tuscan hills. Are you lonely here? She asked. Surprisingly, no, I replied. I've connected with several academics from the university in Florence. There's an informal group of expatriate artists and writers who meet weekly. I'm busier socially than I was in New York. And your children, have they come around? I sighed, swirling the wine in my glass. Thomas has visited once. He brought his wife and children and made a genuine effort to understand my decision. Rebecca sends emails, formal but not hostile. She's requested copies of the trust documents for my records, which I've declined to provide. And Dominic. Radio silence. His pride was wounded more than anything else. He built his identity around being the financial expert, the protector. He can't reconcile that image with being so completely wrong about my art collection. Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. Do you regret it, any of it? I considered her question carefully. I don't regret raising accomplished children. I'm proud of their professional success, but I regret not teaching them to respect experience different from their own. I regret allowing them to believe that aging diminishes wisdom rather than enhancing it. I gestured toward the landscape around us. I regret not doing this sooner, living fully on my own terms. Harold would have loved this place. He would have been proud of you, Evelyn said, standing up for yourself. The art was his legacy, too. I reminded her. He always said we were investing in beauty and in history. He understood the value, not just monetary, but cultural. The children never grasped that dual nature of value. The following week, I hosted a small reception for the first recipients of the Harold and Victoria Blackwell Scholarship for Feminist Art History. 5 brilliant young scholars from around the world, their eyes alight with passion for their subject. As they discussed their research projects, I saw echoes of my younger self, of Harold, of the life we had built around the pursuit of beauty and knowledge. Later that evening, I set up a small easel on my terrace. In our married life, Harold had been the collector and I the academic. My own artistic talents had been set aside early, deemed pleasant but not exceptional. Now in my 8th decade, I picked up charcoal and paper and began to draw the landscape before me, not with any expectation of mastery, but with the simple joy of creation. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. The kids miss you, Mom. Planning to bring them for Christmas if that's okay. I smiled and typed back, of course, there's always room for those who want to be here. As the Italian twilight deepened into velvet darkness, I continued drawing my fingers, remembering skills long dormant but not lost. Life, I reflected, was not merely about understanding the value of money. It was about understanding the value of time. And it was never too late to start living exactly as you chose. The night air carried the scent of jasmine and possibility. Tomorrow I would visit museums in Florence, meet friends for lunch, perhaps work on my memoirs. Next month I would return to New York briefly to check on the apartment and collect some books I wanted. In the fall I would teach a seminar at the small university nearby. My life was full, not despite my children's attempt to restrict it, but because their actions had forced me to recognize and assert its true value. The irony was not lost on me, and occasionally, in quiet moments like this, I allowed myself a small smile of satisfaction. The spreadsheets Dominic had created to control my spending were long deleted. The retirement home brochures had been recycled. The meticulous budget that had been designed to constrain me had instead become the catalyst for my liberation. Sometimes the most valuable lesson we can teach our children is that we are more than they imagine us to be. That a parent's life doesn't diminish as their children's lives expand. Rather, it continues to grow, to evolve, to surprise. I added a final stroke to my drawing and sat back to assess it. Imperfect but honest. A beginning rather than an ending, rather like this new chapter of my life. In the distance, the lights of a small village twinkled like earthbound stars. My village now. My community. My choice. Life's true value. I had discovered lay not in what others determined you could spend, but in what you determined you could become, and at 72. I was just beginning to calculate that sum and finding it far greater than anyone, perhaps even I, had imagined.